And then we'll move over to the AFC South. You get the Houston Texans. They have one of the latest buys in Week 14. And then they have a really crucial stretch right after that bye, from Week 15 to 18 between Miami, at KC, and then Baltimore. Basically going to tell us if they are contenders in the AFC truly. And these 3 games, of course, are considered to be playoff teams. So, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Houston, a lot of people are high on. They, to us, won the offseason overall.
Right.
And, they added a lot of good pieces and they overachieved. But sometimes, a la New York Giants, some teams overachieve and then get a tough schedule and then have to regress. Their, strength of schedule is one of the harder ones. That doesn't mean that they're going to finish 8-9 or something of the nature, but I think it has everything to do with, we'll just kind of see what people's expectations are, because if people think that they can be the 1 seed, I saw a couple people predict that. It's like you're going to be disappointed if that is your expectation.
That's way too
If you
high.
think that they win the division game, division again, 3 seed, 4 seed, obviously, and then they hit the 2 or the 1, then obviously that's going to be something that, they're contender 1 to beat. But we cannot discount Jacksonville. I'm telling you, they were one of the Final Four teams in 2022, and they were 8-3, the 1 seed in the AFC, 12 weeks through last year, and then it fell apart due to injuries and just poor play, essentially.
Right.
They will be back, and I'm not even certain Houston will win the division this year. We have to kind of do our first look with predictions and whatnot, but it's not a for sure. Like, Houston's like minus 180, 190 to win the division.
200.
No chance I bet that.
Yeah. And if you look at it, I mean, like, next we have Jacksonville up. They have, some pretty crucial games also early and late, so they kind of split it in the middle, basically.
Right.
They go 1 through 5 are all going to be AFC games, kind of telling us, how seeding will work for the playoffs. And then the end of it is where, they get all the tiebreakers. All their tiebreakers come at the end. But I don't see like a bunch of really difficult teams at the end there. You have Houston, of course. That'll probably be the tiebreaker of who wins this division at the end of the day. Tennessee, the Jets, the Raiders, Tennessee, and then the Colts. I mean, 5 winnable games in the last 6 weeks, basically.
Right.
And it'll kind of tell us if Jacksonville's, I'd expect Jacksonville to either be, if they win the division, of course, they're probably going to be a 3 seed to me, or they're in for the wild card.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, obviously you see on the board, their final 5 games are against non-playoff teams from last year. So that's a huge win.
Yeah.
Obviously, some will be better. Like the Jets won't be a 6-7 win team.
Right.
Colts were 9-win team that were very formidable. And they've had Jacksonville's number. I think they swept them last year, and that was before Jacksonville fell apart.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then really it'll be interesting to see how fast of a start they can get, because they start off 3 road games out of 4, Miami, Buffalo, and Houston. Mm-hmm. All of those, again, important tiebreaker games. And then in between, Cleveland, Indy, very reasonable opponents, both with winning records last year, and then at Chicago, who we're very high on. So if you can go out of that 500, I think they'll be in a really good position. But it'll depend on their hot start for sure.
Yeah. And then the Colts, they have no playoff opponents from last season and from week 13 to 18. They have a bye in there also. So that'll be helpful for them to possibly make a run late. They have to play Jacksonville to end the year. That game is probably going to be important. I don't see 3 AFC South teams making the playoffs necessarily, but they do have the strength of schedule, and that whole aspect of it is so much better than the other AFC divisions.
The Colts are the team that is going to lose people a lot of money, because they are going to be dogs in a lot of games. Obviously, they're not in the spotlight. They're the only team with 1 or fewer primetime games that had a winning record last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they're just flying under the radar. they have the easiest stretch to end the season, and a late bye. It all depends on how well we really only have a 2-game sample size of Anthony Richardson, and people's expectations of him are just so high. To me, it's kind of crazy. But despite the high expectations, nobody's really thinking about the Colts as a playoff team. And it's like they are right there, and they're probably going to be a team that sneaks in if they win the games that they're supposed to, because they have a really good roster.
Yeah, we talked about it on our power rankings. It's like they're really difficult to rank.
Mhm.
Just a really hard team to find a spot for, because if they pick up 2 more wins, all of a sudden they're, possibly the 7th seed, 6th seed in the wild card. And it wouldn't surprise us. But it's also like, but we see other teams that should probably do better than them. And like I said, I don't see 3 teams out of the AFC South making the playoffs. So,
But you never know, though, because say everybody beats each other up in the AFC North,
right.
and then you only get one, for example. And then in the AFC East, we saw really a lot of teams get worse.
Yeah.
And then the Jets are really the only team that improved, but how much did they improve?
Right.
It's all Aaron Rodgers dependent, because we saw how poorly it went without him. So you just can't guarantee anybody in that division. And the AFC West might be too soon for Harbaugh to assume playoffs. And
Right,
that's fine.
of course.
The Raiders didn't solve their quarterback situation. So it's kind of hard to see them get better than 8-9. The Broncos will be one of the bottom teams. So one out of there. And then all of a sudden it's just like, oh, well, maybe there is 3 teams out of the AFC South. So we'll just see. But the Colts, I think if they were in another division, they would be a strong bet to make them.
Yeah.
But it's just because Houston and Jacksonville are there. It's kind of hard to put them above either one of those teams without figuring out any kind of injuries.
Right,
far.
of course. And then the Titans, week 5 bye, so early. 5 of the final 7 games are divisional. So that kind of gives them an opportunity. Obviously, we don't see them making it, but if they had a chance to make it, playing a bunch of divisional games at the end of the year and winning them, that's normally a pretty good way to make playoffs. And then one of the big things that stuck out was they're only playing 2 quarterbacks over the age of 27 this year.
Yeah, and obviously that if there's backups or Jacoby Brissett starts
Right.
the whole year over Drake May, that number is not entirely accurate. But just projection wise, there's a lot of young quarterbacks that they're playing, and so they could be a scrappy team. I don't obviously it's way too hard, or I think they're clearly the 4th best team in that division, but that doesn't mean that they can't scrap together 6, 7, 8 wins and just be a thorn in everybody's side towards the end of the year. I mean, they play a lot of teams like Jacksonville, Cincinnati, Houston at home towards the end of the season, all playoff teams that probably a touchdown underdog that they can win 1 or even 2 of those games. And that'll be a big deal for other teams, because that just always happens. It always happens when there's a bad team or a below average team that just finds a way to knock somebody out. And look at the Cardinals last year,
That's
how they just
exactly
went
what I was
into Philly,
thinking.
and they not only knocked Philly from being a possible 1 seed, they went all the way down to the wild card. And then they got blown out against Tampa. And if they were flipped and they were the 2 seed against against Green Bay, who's to say, even as bad as they were playing, it would be the same result as what Dallas did.
Well, I was going to say Dallas and Arizona also beat Dallas earlier in the year. And if Philly wins that game in Arizona, it's the other way around. And so Arizona was the one that was kind of calling the shots for that NFC East group. So yeah, no, it could happen.